for most of us. And now with a post-corona world, the job market's become even more challenging. So today's session will be a finance session. Before I get on to introducing our all-star lineup, just a few housekeeping rules. So there's a Q&A chat in the Zoom meeting. So if you have any questions, please post them on the Q&A chat, not in the chat box, because it's easier for us to track the questions there that way. If you are brave enough to come onto video and ask the question live, raise your hand, and our genius tech guy, Nick Mann in the background, will be able to put you on video and allow you to ask the question live. So to introduce our speakers, Sania Hussain is a finance analyst at Apple. Before you ask, no, she cannot get you a discount on Apple products. I've tried. Shoaib Chowdhury is a consultant at Boston Consulting Group. And last but not least, Mudassar Chowdhury. They're not related, they spell their surname differently, but both Chowdhurys. We'll have that discussion separately. He's an assistant manager at MYI. Now, Sania and Shoaib, they'll go through their careers and how they got to where they are. But just in terms of background for the audience, Sania and Shoaib both were graduates, are graduates of the University of Cambridge, whereas Mudassar did a route via an apprenticeship. So as I know, apprenticeships are much more appealing in this day and age. I forgot to introduce myself actually. My name's Qasim. I'm part of YPN, the Young Professional Network, and also the face of the operation, as you can see. So again, look, this is an interactive session. So what we'll do, we'll start off with the presenters giving 5 to 10 minutes of introducing themselves in a bit more detail, and then we'll move on to the Q&A session. So as you have questions, please post them and ask as many questions as possible to these 3 individuals who are working professionals, been there, done that kind of thing. So without further ado, let me hand over first to Sania Hussain.
Okay. Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay? I assume you can. Yeah, cool. So as Qasim mentioned, I studied at Cambridge and I did a degree in geography, which probably sounds a bit crazy to most people, but I think in recent years, more people have gone down the sort of humanities route, which is encouraging to see. At the time, it was a bit weird. I was the only Muslim in my year. And then while I was at university, I was always quite conscious that, what am I going to do with a geography degree? So I did a number of internships. I did a spring week at KPMG and then a summer internship at Grant Thornton. So I kind of knew I wanted to pursue a finance sort of route and get some sort of qualification, which strictly speaking, you don't really need a degree for. You kind of, as Qasim mentioned, nowadays, there's loads of really good apprenticeships and things like that. So if you know what you want to do, that's there's lots of predefined routes you can take. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but sort of fell into the finance trap, as it were. And following university, I was lucky enough to be offered a job with KPMG on their audit graduate scheme because I'd interned with them. And the route that I took to get my ACA was something called the intensive scheme, which I think still exists today. And some of you might be familiar with. So how that worked was there's 15 exams in the ACA, but KPMG offer a route where you can take 14 of them in your first year. So you're not really doing much work apart from they bring you in for a bit of busy season, as it were. You can, if anyone wants to know what that is, feel free to ask. And then you're kind of free to do your exams and go to college the rest of the year. So by the end of your first year, all things being well, you pass 14 exams, and then you're ready to do 2 years of just solid work and sit your final case study paper at the end of the 3 years. So that's the route that I took in audit at KPMG. And then at the end of the 3 years, as a lot of people do at the end of a 3-year graduate scheme in audit, I wanted to try something else. Didn't really think audit was for me. So I decided to move internally within KPMG to a smaller department called Accounting Advisory Services. I enjoyed that. It was very different, very technical accounting, very challenging in a way, which was good. Still very client focused, working with businesses, solve their problems, all that jazz. But it was only really related to accounting. So after I did that for a year, I sort of thought, okay, I like finance. I kind of like where this is going, but I want a broader view of finance. So I thought I'll take a more commercial role which again, you can ask me what that means because I'm sure all of this is just jargon. But so what that basically entails is having a broader view of how finance affects a business, not just the nitty-gritty accounting. And luckily I got a job at Apple, which was kind of my dream job, really. It's a great company. They are constantly like changing, growing, and this was before coronavirus, so thankfully they've managed to do fairly well. And yeah, so my job as a finance analyst is a lot more just general finance and less just technical accounting. And I've been there for, gosh, how long? Just under a year now. And yeah, alhamdulillah, it's going okay, I think. A bit difficult working from home, but I'm sure we can all relate to that struggle. So yeah, that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Jazakallah khair for that, Sania. A very good, succinct summary of your career. Now, Mudassir Shuaib, please take note of that, and no long autobiographies, please. So let's move on to Mudassir first, because just that yellow T-shirt just is so prominent. I think we need to just go to Mudassir first. So handing over to you now, Mud.
Thank you very much, Qasim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is my yellow gym T-shirt, so I've just come back from the gym. So yeah, assalamu alaikum, everyone. As Qasim mentioned, I'm an assistant manager in EY. To give a succinct overview of my career, so I went to Newham Sixth Form College, Newvic, which is, you know, not the most greatest college out there, especially not in the area. So very determined to go to university, study maths, to, you know, do a master's in maths. I did a program in the summer between year 12 and year 13 at EY, or better known as Ernst & Young, called a Smart Futures program. It's actually quite funny. I did it with Shuaib, who's on the chat, and I haven't spoken to him or met him in 7 years since we did that. So, you know, nice to meet you, Shuaib. So did that 3-week internship in the summer. It was Ramadan, so I thought, you know, why not? I'm not going to do anything else in my summer holiday. It was paid. It was quite well paid. It was like 600 quid, which is a lot of money for a, you know, 16-year-old. So I did that, and it completely changed my outlook. I wanted to do a school leaver program, get straight into work, get a qualification, earn some money. So I did that from 2014. I didn't do it as intensive as Sanya. I didn't do 14 exams in a year. God, that sounds horrific. So I did mine over about 4 years, and that's how to make school leavers do at EY. Qualified in 2019, 1st of Jan 2019, I was qualified, and then became an assistant manager at the age of 23, which was amazing. And today I'm actually the co-chair of the EY Muslim community, which is 700 Muslim colleagues at EY from across the globe. So I lead all our initiatives in that regard. Assistant manager within the firm, and, you know, done so many wonderful things within finance. You know, I've traveled to conferences in Berlin where, you know, I was half the age of every attendee, which was quite fun. You know, people were talking about things they were doing in 1995, and I was like unborn. In terms of finance, yep, I'm based in audit, so I work in hospitality. So my main clients are Hilton Hotels and Marriott Hotels. So really, really big hospitality brands. You know, you get to see some of the biggest people within the finance world. You get to speak to them pretty much on a daily basis. I've done audit for the last 6 years, and I'm hopefully moving to something a bit different soon, but still don't know what that is. So, you know, still under the wraps. So that's a little autobiography for me. Hope that was enough, Qasim.
That was very succinct. I'm impressed, Mudassir. You definitely written that down, because last time we were here all day. But Mudassir for that. And again, look, I just need to reiterate, if there are any questions, please, I'm seeing some questions coming already, which is really good. So let's just move on to Shuaib, who's had a bit of a different route to the others. And I saw Shuaib's already answered a question on the chat as well. Look at him, proactive as ever, mashallah. So handing over to you now, Shuaib.
Yeah, no, thank you, Qasim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I'm Shuaib. As Qasim mentioned, I did economics at university. You don't actually need to study economics, actually, when it comes to finance. It doesn't really matter what degree you do. And I think Sania mentioned it as well, like sort of geography, history. You know, I work with people that did all sorts of degrees, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so I actually worked in investment banking for almost 2 years before my current job. Did a few internships in banking, whilst I was at university. So I mean, quite familiar with that sort of space as well, if you've got any questions around that. But now I work in consulting. So a lot of people don't actually know what consulting is. I think it's quite a niche area. So to sort of give you a 30-second overview of what consulting is, it's like professional problem solving for big companies. So they might come to us. So for example, Boots might come to us and say, look, we used to be the biggest seller of beauty products in the UK. Now Amazon is taking all of our business. Like, help us to solve that problem. How do we get more profitable? So sort of helping big companies to really improve their profits and solve their problems. So I've been doing that for a couple of years now. And yeah, I'm been enjoying it. It's quite an intense job, but it's also very interesting. You learn new things every day. So yeah, happy to answer any of your questions when it comes to finance or consulting or anything around that.
That's amazing. Thank you all for your summaries. Now, before we move on to Q&A, what I should say to the audience is each of our participants kind of failed to mention certain qualities about themselves. So obviously they're very humble, mashallah. So just to give a bit of background, Sania herself, correct me if I'm wrong, Sania, but you were at Plashit Girls' School and also went to Newvic.
Yeah.
So again, yeah. So against all the odds. So my point, but what I'm trying to make it clear to those listening in is all of our speakers, although they seem really kind of amazing, actually, they might not seem amazing, to be honest. But what they've said, amazing achievements, mashallah, they started very much from the bottom and now they are where they are. Mudassir Chowdhury, for example, what he failed to mention is he co-chairs the EY Muslim community. And he also, what was the award you won, Mudassir, for apprenticeship? Was it BAME Apprentice of the Year or something? Can you unmute, Mudassir?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So, and then Shoaib Chowdhury, again, what he failed to mention is at again, correct me if I'm wrong, Shoaib, but at Loxford School, you were the first to receive an offer to Cambridge?
Yeah, something like that.
And also, and Shoaib was also, there was an article written about him just because of the sheer number of internships he did. So again, just to reiterate to the audience, you have some exceptional individuals sitting here with you today. And again, they're volunteering their time. I'm not paying them for this. If they do ask for money, I'm not giving them anything. But look, please feel free to ask a question. So let's move on to the Q&A. Alhamdulillah, it looks like there's quite a few things coming in. So let's see. The first one is, to get into investment banking, do you have to do well in English? There's quite a few investment banking ones. So Shoaib, let me just summarize these. And then there's another one. Is it possible to get into investment banking without A-level maths, but with A-level economics and business? So Shoaib, do you want to take those two?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer those. So in terms of your actual degree, it doesn't really matter. So even investment banking itself is quite a broad sort of area. So there's loads of different things you do in investment banking, right? There's some of the things you do in investment banking, people are like modeling financial models with like maths and stats, and those sort of guys have PhDs in maths, right? Then there's some people that are working on helping with mergers and acquisitions. They're much more about relationships. So it's less about how well you did in maths and more about how are you as a person. So investment banking itself is quite a broad term, and people do lots and lots of different things within investment banking, and you need different skills on each of those. So, but I think as a graduate, you don't actually need a specific degree to get into banking. And it's more about, who are you as a person and how well have you done at university, what sort of extracurriculars you've done. Because on the job, and it's not just banking, you learn basically everything on the job, right? They're just looking about, do you have the hardworking capabilities? Are you, enthusiastic? They're not looking for like an economics degree or an English degree or an engineering degree. So yeah, that's sort of my perspective on it.
Perfect. Jazakallah khair for that, Shoaib. So I think there's another one directed towards you. How did the consulting lecturer get into his field of work? So you've been promoted to a consulting lecturer now, Shoaib.
Consulting lecturer. Yeah, so I mean, when I was at uni, I always had an interest in like business and finance and companies. So I just like, okay, what sort of careers are there in that? So there's banking, as you know, and then there's consulting, which is helping, really improve their performance basically. And they came onto campus, went to a few of their events, did a bit of research. and I thought this seems quite interesting, and just applied via the graduate scheme program. And then, yeah, did my interviews, and yeah, after a few rounds, I got in. So it's quite, most of these processes tend to be quite structured. It's not like, you know, there's a typical process for all of them.
But Shoaib, so obviously that you're being too humble. Like you're talking about the general process of getting in. What do you think? What would you say was the key characteristic that you had that made it such that you got into these roles? Because I personally know how competitive consulting can be. Yeah,
for sure. I think if we think about it from like for example, if you're on your CV, I think you should be very specific on your CV about, and again, it's not about what you did specifically, but it's about what impact did you have. So, you know, if you say I'm the president of the EY Muslim community, you know, if on your CV, always be very specific. Okay, so under my leadership, we went from 20,000 to 50,000. They always want to see exactly what your impact has been. That really helps you to stand out, because as you say, a lot of the time, you know, you have thousands of applicants for each of them. So having things that you do outside of your studies, and also making sure that you've had an impact on those, is quite important, and highlighting that. Obviously, doing well at university is important, because they're looking for people that are, you know, hardworking or smart enough to do the job. And just being quite proactive, you know, reaching out to people, speaking to people. There's an element of that as well. That's quite important. So I think being proactive and really outlining your individual achievements is important.
So that's really helpful, Shoaib. Jazakallah khair for that. Now, taking a bit more of a different route, there's a couple of questions around an internship. So, Mud, if you could look to answer, there's a couple of, one is, how did you get an internship? And then there's another one I saw, there's so many questions, mashallah. Yeah, so would you recommend taking a classic route by going to university, or starting an apprenticeship as soon as you leave school? Maybe you can take those two, Mud.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with, how did you get an internship? So nearly every big organization out there offers internships, but they all offer it at different levels. So talking about EY, Ernst & Young, we have a separate charity function called EY Foundation, which every year across the UK, we take in hundreds of, you know, year 12, year 13 students to come in and do internships. And that's not only at EY, we do it with about 200 other corporate partners, we call them. So that includes law firms, banking firms, it includes construction firms, technology firms, charities, the whole shebang. So that's one way. A really good website for that is allaboutschoolleavers.com. So they normally highlight and promote all internship and actual school leaver opportunities available across the UK. In terms of what I recommend taking a classic route, i.e. by going university or starting an apprenticeship, I think it's really dependent on you as a person. So for me, you know, I was really set on going to university, right? My brother, my sister, everyone in my family was going to university. It was seen as the only way to success, or corporate success at least. But when I did my internship, I realized, you know, I'm going to be spending 3 years at university, you know, taking on at least 27K of debt if I stay at home, if not, you know, near 40K of debt if I move out to another, you know, city or move out of home. Whereas if I started working at 18, I'd be earning a really good salary at 18. I'd be qualifying about 2 years quicker than someone who went to, you know, university, and I'd be getting 5 years of experience when they'd still be at 2 years of experience. So to me, it made more sense. However, saying that, right, starting work at 18 is not as easy as it might sound. You know, you need to be really grounded, you know, especially with the age of social media, right? So when I was joining, Snapchat was really booming. It probably still is, but Snapchat was really booming. So, you know, I'm an 18-year-old sitting in an office, and it's like 6:30 p.m. and I'm sitting with everyone that's about 30 plus, you know, so not anyone that's, you know, in my social circle, so to say. Open your phone, you check, oh, your mates are out at the cinema, or they're out at bowling, they're having a dinner, and you're stuck in an office in front of an Excel spreadsheet trying to work out why, you know, 100 million pounds of cash has gone left and 100 million pounds of revenue has gone right. And you're just like, I have no idea what the hell is going on. And honestly, my first few weeks, I was like, what the hell have I just done here? Like, did I make the worst mistake of my life? Like, I'm sat here trying to make these numbers agree, and they just don't agree. But that being said, looking at it today, alhamdulillah, I look back and I see people that went university or did, you know, degrees, and I look at myself and I'm so far ahead of them, not only in terms of experience, but in terms of qualification, in terms of networking, in terms of skills, where, I don't think if I went to university, I'd have that same option. So for me, it worked brilliantly. But it really, really depends on if you are able to ground yourself, if you're able to be disciplined with yourself, if you can essentially hack, starting work 3, 4, 5 years earlier than all your peers. And if you think, you can, then sure, great. I would always recommend an apprenticeship, because a university degree, it's not only you can only do it at 18. You can do it at 21, you can do it at 24, you can do it at 25. For example, I'm hoping to do an MBA within the next couple of years, and I can still do that despite not having a degree. Whereas, if I had a degree, I went to university, yeah, I'd have loads of different skills, right? You learn all these different skills from going to university. You get a chance to go and do more internships like Shoaib did. But it really depends on how you are as a person, depends on the company you want to join. So there's a lot of different factors. So if someone wants to, discuss in a bit more detail, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, so that's really interesting perspective. So let me kind of go to the flip side of that. So Sania and Shoaib, you both went to university. So what's your kind of view on university versus apprenticeship based on your experience at university, but also your experience now in the workplace? So I don't know which one of you want to take that, Belle.
I can take that to start with, if you want.
Yeah.
So I agree with Modesto in a way that if you kind of know what you want, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just checking. I agree that if you kind of know what you want to do, so say, for example, your life's ambition is to become an accountant, there are so many amazing school leaver programs, apprenticeships, things like that, and it's definitely worth checking out, because an accounting degree or a finance degree is not going to really help you any more than an apprenticeship or school leaver program will, apart from if you want the sort of non-career related benefits of university, which I'll talk about in a second. But something that I think maybe a little bit controversial to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, because, well, like Muslims here, we need to be honest with each other, right? So if you have an offer or are able to study at a top university, to me, that's still a very, very valuable asset in this day and age, because it opens doors. When I apply for a job, or Shoaib, I'm sure you can, and Qasim as well, if you see the word Cambridge graduate, that's, people will immediately just, give you the time of day. And of course, an apprenticeship or a school leaver program is immensely valuable as well. And you have to be honest with yourself. You have to know where your strengths lie, what your abilities are, what you're capable of doing, and how you can best fulfill your potential. Because if you feel like you could go to a top university, there's a lot you can gain from that, not just career related, but from a worldly perspective, from just gaining more skills, learning how to talk to people, interacting in an unfamiliar environment. I mean, we can, on this panel, we can all relate, from East London to Cambridge is not an easy jump. And the amount you learn about the world and everything, it's not just about your career. But obviously, while you're at a university, companies come to you. There's numerous careers events, dinners, things like that. You get opportunities in that way as well. And you can do your internships. And if, say, you wanted to go down an academic route, you want to do a PhD or whatever in finance even, then having that sort of university grounding is very useful. So I would say it's about knowing yourself and knowing what you actually want to do, if you do know that. And if you don't know that, and because 18 is very young, let's be honest, then either university or an apprenticeship is not a bad idea. Both are going to set you up well. It's just knowing what you want to achieve and what you think might be the best way to get there. If you know that you want to just make money as soon as possible, then yeah, look into the apprenticeships and school leaver programs, because there's some really good ones out there. And not just in finance. I know of people at KPMG who are doing apprenticeships in sort of engineering and data science and things like that. And they do get a degree in there as well. So it's worth really sitting down and exploring all of your options. University is a conventional route, of course, but there's a lot of great alternatives out there. So, talk to us, talk to anyone in your network, because those people have been there, walked the journey that you're thinking of walking. And we're all more than happy to talk to you, because for a lot of us, we didn't have that many people who we could speak to. There were a few, 100%. We're not the first to, we're not the trailblazers, but now, alhamdulillah, like Muslims are in a position where all of us are doing all sorts of things. So utilize that, do your research, and really think about what you want to do. Because I mean, 18 is sort of a great age to be thinking about this, and it can really set you up well if you make right decisions now. That was a bit waffly, so if you have any more questions, do ask me, but that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, that's it. No more questions to Sania after that. But Shaib, do you have anything to add to the kind of university versus apprenticeship discussion?
No, I think Mudassir and Sania have summarized it quite well. I think for me, the biggest thing I got out of uni was less the academic side of things, because I'm sure you know, like, you kind of forget most of the academic stuff after a while. It's much more about the people I met. So I think the biggest benefit I got from uni, and I'm sure you can get this to some extent in an apprenticeship, but as Mudassir said, you don't have as many people your age doing different things in one place in an apprenticeship, I guess. So the biggest benefit for me of university was that I met people that were from all sorts of backgrounds, doing all sorts of degrees. Like if I think about my best friends, like, you know, they're all doing all sorts of different careers. So I think that's the best thing about uni. You get that non-academic experience. But there's definitely a massive benefit. Actually, my dad was pushing me to do an apprenticeship. So, you know, there's massive benefits to not having, you know, 50, 60, 70 grand's worth of debt on your head. And, you know, every time I see the student loan payment come out of my account, it's a bit heartbreaking. So, you know, you have to decide on what's important to you and what's really, you know, your skill set, as Sonia and Mudassir said. But the benefit of uni for me is the people you meet, and I would recommend it.
Jazakallah khair for that, Shuaib. I hope when you said best friends, I'm included within that. Yeah. So moving on, there's a few questions around the halality of finance. So I don't know who wants to take this, but there's three separate questions. So how do we ensure to stay on the halal side of finance? How does being a Muslim and Islamic jurisprudence affect your job in finance? Are there any contradictions? And then specifically around investment banking, is investment banking all right? Because some companies you invest in may not be halal. Not sure who wants to take that question, or if you just want to ignore it and pretend it didn't come up.
I can try to answer that. Look, I don't know the Islamic rulings in depth, obviously, but again, as I said, if you talk about banking or you talk about, it depends massively, because there's so many different aspects of an investment banking job. Obviously, some of them will be, you know, dealing directly with interest, right? So those ones are probably off the cards in terms of what jobs you can do. But, you know, there's all sorts. If you work in a bank, what do you do? So there's the trading side of things, where you're investment banking side of things, where you're like, oh, two companies want to merge. You know, Facebook wants to go public. We're going to advise them on that. Maybe that's allowed. So it depends. Like, there's some aspects of it that are arguably, you know, haram, I guess, and there's some aspects that aren't. So you can definitely choose within that to sort of pick an area that suits you. So yeah, I think it's very much on you to sort of be proactive about which areas you want to go into and where you can avoid it. So, for example, one of our good friends, his name's Hasim, he worked for Goldman Sachs for a bit, and he was working in their interest rate department, and he was like, no, I can't really do this. So he decided proactively to move over to something which he thought was more, you know, in line with his values and in line with Islamic values, and you can do that. So yeah, it depends on where you work and which area you decide to pursue. And similarly, I'm sure in every area, really, because even in consulting, for example, where you're not dealing with financial products, sometimes we might consult for, you know, alcohol companies. And I've been very clear to the people that staff me on projects that, look, I don't want to work for, you know, Heineken or something. That's just not something that I want to do. And they tend to be very receptive to that, because there tends to be lots of different areas you can work in. So yeah, it's not just in banking, it's across the whole spectrum, really.
Yeah, jazakallah for that, Shaib. And the point I'd make there is exactly what you said, Shaib, in terms of your research into investment banking or finance or the companies you work for. Because unfortunately nowadays, as soon as we hear the word finance, we kind of say, oh, astaghfirullah, you know, haram. But the point of it is as you said, Shaib, when you're actually working for those companies, when you're there, there's so many different elements and different aspects of the of that, you know, that one company, and also the jobs that you do day to day. So just to reiterate here, and look, Sania mentioned this as well, the whole point is to discuss and to talk to, you know, professionals working in the field, which is why we have Sania, Mudassir and Shuaib on today. And I'm sure each of them will be more than happy for you to reach out to them on LinkedIn. to add them on LinkedIn, ask them questions, and this is how you build that network, right? It doesn't necessarily mean so now all of you on the call today can say, oh, I know someone who's a graduate from Cambridge. I know someone who's an assistant manager at UI. I know someone who's a finance analyst at Apple. Don't mention that to your relatives, because as soon as they hear that, they want a discount, just FYI. But so moving on from that, I think there's quite a few questions around, there's loads of different questions around your route to finance. You know, what subject should you take? I do X degree or I do X subject. What are my options? So there's loads of questions around that. So this is an open question to Sania, Mudassar, and Shuaib. What would your responses be to that in terms of what subject should you take? Is there a specific degree to take? Or, what do you need for an apprenticeship? What do you need for a graduate role?
Perfect. Let me just start with that, right? So when I was set on going to university, so at AS levels, I was studying maths, further maths, chemistry, politics, and Urdu. Don't ask why I did Urdu. It was just, I did it at GCSE, got an A star. I was like, this is going to be a walk in the park. When I did my internship at EY, I spoke to them. I was like, do you require a subject? And they said, no, we just require A levels. They can be in anything. So obviously, being the smart person I am, I dropped further maths and chemistry because I didn't want to kill myself. So my A levels actually are in maths, Urdu, and government politics. And whenever I mention that, people are like, what? You've got an A level in Urdu and you're working at a global financial services firm? I'm like, yeah. The partner I work with right now's degree is in Italian, i.e. the language. So, ultimately it depends on what your final career decision is, and you should work backwards rather than upwards. So if you want to do a role which actually requires mathematical analysis and requires a degree in maths, you should look at that role and realize, okay, I need a degree in maths, and for the university I'm applying for, they need an A level in maths. But on the flip side, if you're looking to go into consulting, if you're looking to go into auditing, if you're looking to go into, tax, accounting, or whatever it may be, generally you don't need maths, you don't need to do economics, you don't even need to do accounting and finance at uni. You can do, literally whatever you like. And if you're going to go university, I'd always recommend studying a subject which you really like, which you want to study for 3 years, because it's going to be insanely difficult, A, to motivate yourself, and B, to push yourself to do a degree for 3 years where no one's holding your hand, no one's spoon feeding you, to go and learn something which you just don't like. And those 3 years are really, I haven't been through university, right? But I've mentored a lot of students that have been, I've worked with a lot of people that have been, and always the thing I hear from them is, do a degree in something you like, and it will take you wherever it needs to do, because a degree will give you skills more than technical experience. So that's my 2 pence on it.
So I think that's a perfect segue into Sania, who did geography. Now, obviously, when we hear geography, we just think all you did for your degree was, laminate the first, your books, color in the world map, etc. Go to a beach and count how many pebbles there were. So Sania, how did you go from doing geography at uni to going into kind of KPMG audit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I take a step back to my A levels, so I started out, as many of us do, thinking I want to do medicine at university, and my older sister did that, so I thought, oh, me too. But so I started with AS levels in maths, further maths, biology, chemistry, and geography. Geography was kind of the afterthought, to be honest. But then once I sort of started looking at what I want to do at university, and seeing how hard medicine is while my sister was at med school, I thought, nah, this is not for me. So for my final A levels, I ended up with maths, biology, and geography. And honestly, like at university, obviously everyone's done various A levels to get to the degree. A lot of people didn't even do geography A level, to be honest. It's just some level of humanities or whatever was enough, or science, depending on what angle of geography you wanted. And then going from there into audit at KPMG, honestly, the number of people who did accounting related degrees at KPMG was like probably less than 10%. Like you don't need it. I know in some cases you get exemptions from some of the exams and things like that, but in general, like it didn't really benefit them, apart from maybe the first few exams. They understood what a debit or a credit was, whereas the rest of us were like, what? different language, but you get up to speed pretty quickly. And most of my peers did humanities or sciences or just literally anything you can think of was covered in our graduate scheme intake. Honestly, we done all sorts of subjects. So it doesn't really matter in that regard, unless you are doing something vocational, as Modesta mentioned. And obviously in other fields, like a law degree would be beneficial. But even then, there's paths to do law without a law degree, medicine and things like that are different, obviously. But with finance, it's really broad. And like Modesta said perfectly, like if there's something you're passionate about and you've decided university is the way for you, it's the best time to pursue that passion and see where it takes you. You've still got all those doors open with careers and everything, but you won't get that opportunity again necessarily to just study something you really enjoy for 3 years. I've actually forgotten what the question was, but I think that's that's what I had to say.
This is why I'm not going to ask you any more questions, Sonia. But no, that answered the question. That answered the question exactly. And so Shoaib, anything to add to that kind of the whole, what skills do you need, what subjects do you need, what degrees do you need, any kind of pearls of wisdom?
No, I think the pearls of wisdom came from Sania and Modesta, to be honest. I think it depends. I think pick something that you enjoy doing. That's the most important thing. You don't want to be doing something that is, the worst part of it, especially if you're doing it at a hard university. It's just going to make your life miserable if you don't do something that you enjoy. So yeah, it's not about the degree, it's more about how well you're doing it.
So just to add another question to that, Shoaib. So to the audience, I previously mentioned that there was an article written about you because of the sheer number of internships you did. Now, again, you can be humble, but I don't have to be humble on your behalf. Like going from a school such as Loxford, not to sugarcoat it, but one of the worst schools in the area, and then going on to getting an offer from Cambridge University, and all of these internships that you applied for, and you were successful at actually getting into, getting an amazing job off the back of university as well. Now, that wasn't because of nepotism. That wasn't because you knew someone working at these companies. That wasn't because of your uncle giving you that job. What was it that made you so successful at applying to internships, applying to Cambridge jobs, etc.? What makes you tick?
Okay. I think the biggest thing is being proactive in general. So what I mean by that is, you can go to your job or you can go to your internship and you can sit in the lectures and you can learn about, debts and credits and, finish it off with your 1 week and then you're done. And I think what it was really beneficial is, I'll give you an example. So I did a spring week on at a place called Credit Suisse. It's a bank, it's a Swiss bank. And I met a guy there and, we hit it off, we talked about cricket, when I was doing a bit of the rotation scheme. So, you shadow some of the people and they talk about what they do in their job. I met one of the guys, we hit it off on cricket. We continued speaking and, the next thing you know, he had moved from Credit Suisse to Goldman Sachs and we were still in contact. And I said to him, "Oh, I'm applying for internships this summer. Can you recommend me," for example? And then he recommended me and, there was 10,000 people applying. And, because of his recommendation, it immediately put me through to the first round of the internship. So, most interns would probably have just sat in the classroom and not really continue that relationship over time. But being proactive and driving that really helps. And I've realized once you get into a good, place or opportunity, it sort of is self-fulfilling. You realize you meet more people and then they help you out, and then you meet more people and they help you out, and it's really a beneficial spiral. So, making the most of your internships and being proactive is the biggest thing, I think. Sorry, I had a bit of background noise. My mom was speaking.
No. Mum comes first, obviously. But no, Jazakallah khair for that. Thank you, Shoaib. And that's really apt advice. I think proactivity is key, and not just when you're applying, but also thereafter, to climb that corporate ladder, as they say, or greasy poles.
And I'd say on another thing, I think one thing people struggle with, and I definitely did at the beginning, is when you come from, and I don't know what the sort of background of everyone here is, but if you come from, East London, or you come from, you know, a state school, the biggest thing I've realized is not your academic ability, it's your confidence and your polish and, you know, how you come across and how you perform in interviews. So practicing on that is super important. You know, it took me like a good amount of time to think through, like, you know, practicing, for example, in the mirror, being comfortable speaking, you know, about your subject or about what your achievements are. It doesn't come naturally because I think at state schools, you don't get that delivered as much. So it takes more effort to really be comfortable in interviews. And I'd recommend you sort of invest some time on that.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice, Shoaib. And this is the point I'd reiterate to everyone dialed in. Look, you get really real advice from these individuals. Again, we're not paying them to give you this advice. This is just their experiences. We've got someone in the audience who has their hand up. So Habiba, we're going to take you off mute and put you on live. So feel free to ask a question. You're unmuted now. Stage fright, it seems. That's fine. Now, if we move on to other couple of questions with us, so there's a couple of questions around internship versus university. Do you have any regrets? You know, do you now reconsider whether you should have gone to university or not?
Honestly, no. And I've never, ever regretted not going to university. And that's for a few reasons, right? First is, I think it was the biggest thing first, but not anymore. It was the student debt side of it, right? I just didn't want to be in 30 to 40 to 50, depending on, you know, university and whatever amount of debt. Rather, in that time, I was able to go on really, really nice holidays. I was able to buy myself really, really nice things. You know, I was able to travel to like 15 countries, and I was able to really, you know, enjoy my youth, so to say, right? So I didn't regret it from that respect. But from a career,
there's so many questions. I don't have time for fast.
Oh, you want to mute yourself,
Sorry.
Qasim? So in terms of career-wise or skills, I don't think I regret it at all, because in those 3 years where I would have gone to university, I gained so many skills. I made so many networks where I was able to do things no one my age was able to do. You know, last year I went to a conference in Berlin. It was like a partner conference, and I was like, hey, I want to go. This looks quite interesting. And I was able to go, and it was the funniest thing in the world, because I'm sat in this boardroom where there's about 30 people. You know, these are all global heads of different areas across the world. So from America all the way to Australia, and everyone's introducing themselves. And hey, I'm global head of hospitality. You know, I'm the head of restaurants in Australia. I'm the head of all resourcing in Saudi Arabia. And it came to me, and I was like, I'm just a recently qualified ACA accountant from London. And I kid you not, the whole room looked in like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I asked to be here and I'm here. And that was only possible because in those first 3 years, I was able to network with those people that actually make the decisions in my department. And I think that's the most important skill, and that thing that really made me stand apart from people that were doing, you know, degrees. In those 3 years, I was able to build an amazing group of network, you know, where, you know, people were able to ultimately move mountains for me to do things I wanted to do, not things I needed to do, or not things, you know, I was forced to do, but things I really wanted to do. So yeah, never ever regretted it, alhamdulillah.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And that's sound advice for everyone else as well. Kind of sometimes you make the decision and afterwards Allah shows you the results. So just kind of mentioned, there was a lot of questions in the Q&A chat. We tried to answer a lot of them. I know some of them we kind of brushed over in one hit. So if you do want to follow up, or you want to ask a more specific question to our panelists, or just send them in, if you go via the Muslim Youth Initiative MYI website and send your question in by email, we will make sure that we get you in touch with the right person to respond to that question. Because obviously there's a lot of people on the call, a lot of questions to answer, and we only have around 10 minutes left, so we won't be able to answer all of them. We have a hand up in the audience, Waris Afridi. So we've taken you off mute, Waris. Do you want to ask your question?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
First of all, obviously, thank you for this opportunity. Obviously, I didn't realize that the participants would be from such huge background. I just had a quick question. So I'm currently applying for graduate roles and schemes, and obviously, some of the stages obviously consist of like video interview, online interview, assessment centers. But obviously now assessment centers have changed to online as well. So I was just wondering, like particularly when it comes to the strength tests and the competency tests and the situational ones, because nowadays, like I've been applying, and you get a lot of those kind of questions, and they even give you situations, or they would give you even games to do. So I was just wondering, like, how do you kind of prepare for those? Like, there be some questions were just simple as like, what would you do? I don't know, if you were approaching the deadline and you still have tasks to do. So they kind of ask you these kind of questions. So I was just wondering, how would you prepare for those? Thank you.
Yeah, Sania, Shoaib, do you want to jump in with your advice around graduate roles?
Yeah. I can give one.
Go ahead, Sonia. Sorry.
Okay. So I think nowadays, honestly, you've got so many resources at your fingertips, like the internet, YouTube, like you've got people who have put a lot of content out there. And I would really just maximize that. Honestly, there's so much on there. And the first place you should always look is the company's website itself, because every company will be different. They've got their own list of competencies, which you can find in their sort of career portal section. And from that, you can kind of deduce what kind of person they're looking for. So if the question is, how would you approach like a looming deadline or whatever? One company, the perfect answer might be, oh, I would drop everything and just focus on the deadline. But another company that has maybe a slightly more work-life balance type culture, the right answer there might be, oh, I'd prioritize, I'd look at my deadlines, I'd see what can be delegated, what I can negotiate, so, and there's a lot of giveaways on a company's website. So really, really take your time to look at what information they've put out there already. And there's lots of companies that offer sort of test versions of situational judgment tests, verbal numerical reasoning, all of that. There's so much information and resources available on the internet that you should be able to find enough to just practice. So dedicate the time that you need to, and you, inshallah, will succeed, because there is a wealth of information out there. And if you have enough time and discipline to look at it all, you should be fine, inshallah.
Shoaib, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, that was mainly what I was going to say as well. I think now there's so much online that you just have to practice. There's generally tends to be two types of online tests, right? There's the logical reasoning, like, verbal reasoning and maths reasoning, those sort of like, hard skills. Those are much easier to prepare for, right? Because it's not actually difficult in terms of the actual maths, for example, you have to do. It's just like you have to get quick at doing it, and that just takes practice. And then there's the situational judgment test, which is, as Tanya said, that's much more, it's not clear what the answer is, right? It's very difficult. All of them could actually be valid under different circumstances. So you have to look at the specific company and what do they value and what do they push is important.
So, Jazakallah khair for that, Shoaib and Sania. Waris, does that answer your question? Waris, you're off mute.
Yeah, I think that, because obviously I think it kind of, obviously, like you said, it depends on the core values. So obviously some companies or like more person that's more driven, or that would actually try to get things done regardless of deadline or whatever. So I guess that explains it, and with the vast resources that we have.
That's perfect. Jazakallah Waris, and thank you, Sania and Shoaib, for responding. So we've not got much time left. So before we end, I think there's a couple of questions in there, and obviously everyone's favorite question: how much money do you make? So to avoid kind of making everyone jealous and getting nazar and evil eye, let's just go with, like, in your respective fields, what was the starting salary, and kind of so what was the starting salary roughly, and what's the average salary for like someone 3 years into your career, for example?
Yeah. So I think, let me start with this one, just because I speak to so many students, and that is always the first question I get, right? So a lot of times salary depends on two things. It depends on location, i.e. city in the country, and it depends on the role. So I'm going to speak from a London perspective, because London gets paid the most because of London allowance and being the best city in the country, obviously. But so London at an apprenticeship level for the big four, i.e. the big four accounting firms, at an apprenticeship level, so at 18, you're looking at 21, 22K field when you're starting up. Whereas a graduate, joining from the grad scheme, probably looking at 27 to 30K, right? And now you're thinking, well, graduates getting paid a lot more, but you need to realize you're 3 years earlier than them. By the time you qualify, so you've got your qualification, a graduate and an apprentice will be on the same salary, so there will be no difference. And you're looking at 40 to 45K field for once you qualified. And then after that, it really depends on, how quick you excel. There's people in finance that are on, like partners at Big Four, they're on 600, 700, 800K plus a year. Senior managers and directors are on 100 grand a year. So it really depends after that. But from a starting perspective, between the 20 to 30K field is where you would start. And once you qualify after 3 years, if you're a grad, or 4 or 5 years, if you're an apprentice, you're looking at the 40 to 50K mark.
Sounds good. Sana, Shoaib, anything to add?
Modesta and I obviously in quite similar fields when we started out. So yeah, it's roughly in line. In other sort of areas of KPMG, EY, I think you might start on a little bit more, like in the 30s, but then the trade-off is you might not get sponsored to do a qualification. So there'll be a sort of net amount that's roughly aligned across what you decide to do. But yeah, I think Modesto's figures are accurate.
Perfect. Shoaib?
Yeah, I think if we talk about banking specifically, like naturally the reason most people get into banking is because of the pay, right? So you do get paid a lot in banking, but I think the bigger question is more like you have to decide on what is important to you. Because truthfully, if you work in investment banking, you can make, as a straight out of uni, you can make more than 100K like in your first year, right? True, but you work a lot of hours, like you're working all the time. It's high stress, I'm not trying to put you off it, but I'm just saying that you can get paid a lot of money, but you also have to decide like what is important to you as a lifestyle. Do you really need to be making, 250K at 25? Like, are you going for Louis Vuitton bags or whatever? So I think it's less about the money and more about, what do you value? And you're always going to be paid enough in any of these jobs to have a comfortable lifestyle. And it's nice to say, I make this much money, but really, you have to decide if that's really important to you, I think. If you work in banking, you can obviously get paid a lot of money.
No, that definitely makes sense. And obviously, it just varies by field. But as you say, Shoaib, I think you're speaking from a perspective of being there, done that. And I think I definitely echo Shoaib's words in terms of money is one facet of it, but the work-life balance and how you live makes a big difference. And obviously, for us as Muslims, there's other factors to consider. Now we've only got a few minutes left, so we do need to round up. But before we do, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all of the participants for joining. Absolutely amazing participation. I know, and again, to reiterate, we didn't answer all of your questions, but if you do have any questions, burning questions that you want to ask, please feel free to go to the MYI website and email in your questions, and we'll make sure we respond to them. Modesta, Sania, and Shoaib, if I could ask you just to leave your LinkedIn names or profiles in the chat, the Zoom chat. So if people want to get in contact with you, they can do that via LinkedIn. And last but not least, a massive Jazakallah khair. Thank you to Sania, Shoaib, and Modesta for taking out this time. Realistically, they're not going to be doing anything on a Sunday afternoon, but they always say they can tell. Mudassir put on that yellow t-shirt to say he just come from the gym. We all know he just got that out of his cupboard. But regardless, Jazakallah khair for your time. It's been amazing to have you on. The advice you've given is brilliant. And obviously, as we mentioned, for your journeys, literally from East London, from some of the worst schools in the area to some of the best universities and best companies in the world, mashallah. So Jazakallah khair for your advice. May Allah bless you for all that you've given. And for all those participating, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to them, but also make dua for them for the goodness they have passed on to us. So the next session will start in 5 minutes. It will be on engineering and transport. So if those who want to listen, feel free to stay on. If not, I bid you a lovely Sunday afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you.
Bye.